Let's go.
Okay, wait. Okay, so...
Oh, go back.
Oh, my bad, OG.
All right, welcome to I2 Talk Gen AI in college classrooms. I'm Siobhan.
I'm Elizabeth.
I'm glad.
All right.
Okay.
So, introduction. This talk is going to be about 40% lecture, about 50% discussion based, and a little bit exercise here and there. A lot of the topics take from multiple student and instructor interviews, and as well as their own experiences and research. Our topics that we'll be going over are practical applications, motivations, reservations, academic misconduct, concerns, and then universal adoption. All right. So
this is an interesting quote from a Chegg survey that I found, which is 40% of undergrads use AI and half of them use it daily, which is kind of freaky. And I think that's a good intro, pregame. So I wanted to ask y'all, are y'all part of that 40%? And if so, are y'all part of the 50%? Does anyone here use AI on the daily? Not on the daily? What do y'all be using it for, though? Please, this whole conversation. I need to
code.
Yeah.
Code.
Yeah.
And what do you guys think it's particularly good at, or efficient at?
Some code, yeah.
Just code.
I mainly use it for
You mainly use it for Copilot, would you say?
no, I mainly use it for asking creative questions because I'm not creative.
Sure, so
And
idea generation.
What's a question I can ask as an icebreaker? I use that a lot.
Anyone else want to kind of volunteer what they use AI for? Nope.
I really use AI, but I see I only use it to generate synonyms for words.
Okay, that's interesting. Synonyms for words. What was your name, by the way?
And
Annie, nice to meet you. And then Ishan.
Hello. I use AI primarily to define concepts or terms I don't know.
Okay.
As a dictionary.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So all good answers. So it sounds kind of mechanical, mundane, if I will. So we have synonyms, dictionaries, and for idea generation, and sometimes for code. I'm not sure what you use it for code for.
Plotting and fixing non-binary errors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plotting and fixing errors. Okay. Yeah, so I think that kind of aligns with what we've observed in kind of our own interviews. So I guess one of the prefaces from earlier is a lot of kind of what motivates us in this presentation is interviews. And so in the interviews we've conducted, it kind of follows along what you guys have said. And that's also true for both professors and students, actually. So idea generation, so creating ideas, novel ideas, whether it's for research, let's make it come up with research questions or coming up with different prompts, as well as generating practice problems. So that's particularly useful in code. So the people I was speaking to used it in a coding context. And this mic is off. Okay, now it's on.
Okay.
No, it was off a minute ago.
Yeah, it's on the
Lucky.
For idea or for generating practice problems. So for example, you might shove it a bunch of code or have it or
I think it's
concepts,
blue
for
right now.
example. I think it's just dead.
Oh, yeah, take this one.
Yeah, okay, we give up on that. On generating practice problems. So in code, for example, one of the professors I spoke to uses generative AI, kind of in the classroom actually, to come up with novel problems and have students kind of debug that as well. Or someone else I was speaking to kind of used it for midterms and exams, having it kind of Quizlet, if you guys are familiar with that, have it pre-generate a Quizlet for you, essentially. Asking questions, pretty basic, I think, and then also grammar checking as well. Yeah. So going on to motivations and reservations now.
So this is the what we'd be using AI for. This is
This is the why.
and
So,
why not. Should
so
we, I don't know, are we going to ask before, why do y'all not be, or is that no? Okay.
So that is for say the why do people use generative AI like this? I think some of the more obvious ones: convenience, accessibility. It's convenient to just use ChatGPT to say what's the synonym for the synonym, right? Or alternatively, asking it to find your errors, because it's a lot easier than spending 30 minutes trying to find the bug yourself. Accessibility as well. So especially when we're talking about more tutoring type things, asking it to correct something for you or asking it to generate problems. It's easier and more accessible to do that than going to office hours, for example. Furthermore, novelty. So kind of like with idea generation, for example, there's like a certain novelty that ChatGPT, for example, can add that maybe we don't have. Like it'll come up with ideas that we couldn't come up with. So there's definitely novelty there. Improving understanding, that's pretty self-explanatory, as well as like expediting mundane tasks. So similarly, on the flip side, what are the reservations? Because these feel like pretty straightforward uses. Like they're not too extensive, right? Like we're not using ChatGPT for everything, and why is that? So some of the reasons that people were kind of describing is culture and background, for example. So as in like one person I was speaking to was like, hey, I came from a family of teachers. Like this feels wrong. This feels morally wrong for me to like cheat. Or there's like a certain value for some people in learning itself, where it's kind of like the trade-off between like I don't want to use ChatGPT because of brain rot, because I don't want to lose skills and I value learning itself, as well as like, well, I come from this background, cheating is wrong. And then as well as like one kind of particular example, I think I heard from one particular person was actually ChatGPT just sucks. Or like the current LLMs that we have just kind of suck. So there's like limited purpose use. Like for example, ChatGPT is really bad with logic. It's really bad with math. It's really bad with statistics for some reason. So for that reason, a lot of people will choose not to use it because it just sucks. So this is kind of pointing the question back to you guys again now. What values dictate how you use Gen AI? Like why do you use it the way you do? Or what's stopping you from using it more?
I mean, my pride. I don't want to feel like I have to depend on artificial intelligence.
Okay, but like you use Google, like what's the big deal? Why Gen AI so much worse?
Because I don't like. I don't know. I don't know. It just feels. I feel like I'm giving up on something.
I mean, there's like, are some uses more giving up? Others, do you ever use it for like something small, like just a little bit of AI? Are do some tasks you do with AI and some you don't?
Maybe. Like I said before, like I could define concepts that I don't know, but I need further information about.
Yeah, that's like something. So like it's like simplifying your Google search.
Basically.
Okay,
I
that
use
makes
like Google.
I think that makes sense. But like, what exactly would you not use it for? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, so I use it when I code. But sometimes I'm like, dang, I wish I could just do this myself. Like, especially with NumPy, I'm like, oh man, I really wish that I was better at NumPy and I could just do this myself. But like, I don't need to be because ChatGPT is really good at it, so it's kind of fine. But I don't know. So I don't know. Sometimes I try to just. Sometimes I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna go look at the documentation, try to write it. Sometimes I'm like, fuck it, this works, and I have this tool, so why not use it? But then for other things, so like I'm in a class right now, and we're supposed to do these discussion readings, and
Nah.
it's robotics. So people who sign up for robotics are like, we don't want to read.
Yeah.
And you can read through the responses, and you can say, okay, that one's ChatGPT, and from there down, it's all ChatGPT.
Oh wait, so people
are summarizing the reading using ChatGPT.
Oh, okay.
Just, like, grabbing that.
and you said discussion posts?
Yeah.
You could tell? Okay.
Yeah, you can tell.
Were you Annie gonna say something? Oh, okay. I mean, I was just wondering, like, building off that. So, like, do you think it's like because like code, like they have Copilot, like they make it for coding. Like, I wonder if it is part of it. Like, it's more okay to use AI on code. Is that part of the reason you think you use it more? Because like, it seems other people are more okay with it compared to maybe like, I don't know, essay writing. Maybe people like are, or do you think it's just it feels like the tool makes more sense, or do you think it's part of like a cultural thing that's pulling you back?
Well, I think for code, it's like there's a very clear objective. Like you just want the thing to work. It doesn't really. So, well, it kind of depends. So, like sometimes you're coding because you're trying to learn, and then for me, it's like, well, okay, I just want to learn the things that are going to be useful for me. So I'm going to focus on my effort on that. So, like, I don't need to write a lot of code. I don't care about learning that. It's not particularly purely useful. It's just a lot of baggage.
Mhm.
And it takes a lot of time. So I'll just use AI. I don't care.
Would you say that's more utility then? So as in it's better to utilize your time in that way by just saying, okay, ChatGPT, you do this, I don't want to do it. And then spend your time in a way you do better. Would you say that's kind of accurate?
Yeah, it's like me. I'm trying to spend my time learning as much as possible, and I don't learn anything from writing plotting code except maybe marginally getting better at writing plotting code. It's not something I care for. Just like allowing me to choose what I want to focus on.
Yeah. Do we have any kind of more thoughts on this before we move on?
Yeah,
Viva?
I mean, it's kind of a summary of what Jaden said, but I wouldn't use it more because there are things I do want to learn, especially like my CS classes, but I'm in a space class and I have to write an abstract. Or I actually didn't use it, but because I hit the word count like first try without even, I actually went over. But if I didn't hit the word count, I would have definitely consulted some AI just for ideas, because I don't want to get like caught by plagiarism checkers. These are some things.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Anything we want to add on? Okay, we'll move on.
Well,
Now to the elephant in the room.
yeah, all right. So moving on to cheating and Gen AI. Well, here. So some research conducted, like from what we did, was at Stanford. Their student-run newspaper did a poll, and it said that 17% actually used ChatGPT on their assignments and exams, and this at like a top university. And this was back in 2022. Keep in mind, so it like definitely has increased from then till now. And then some admit to submitting the writing as their own, and they're definitely still getting away with it to this day. Study.com also did a study. They discovered that 72% of instructors were worried about the repercussions of GPT on plagiarism. However, only 34% felt like it should be banned. And then 89% of pupils employed it for homework aid. And I feel like that's something common that we see amongst all of us. Like everyone in the classroom, like in the lecture hall, you can see other people's computers. Half the people have ChatGPT open or some other Gen AI open. And then 48% use it for assessments or quizzes, 53% for writing composition, 22% for like grammar, paper structure, that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, like moving on, why do people cheat? Like, why use this? Like, why use it so much for all these like different like items, different uses? And honestly, there's like no clear like one head answer. But our hypothesis would be like there's less barriers, no real social contract in cheating using Gen AI. It's not like looking over someone's shoulder and cheating or getting some paper off of someone and cheating. It's like no social contract. It's just you and the computer. You can type something in, get the response, and it's all good. And so, and then the more like adding on to that, among students, you have burnout, lack of sleep, stress, procrastination, which leads to people like falling back on some other tool that they can use to like improve their life or save up some of their time. And then, according to the same Czech study referenced earlier, 59% of students worldwide say they have experienced not sleeping enough. 54% have experienced daily feelings of anxiety, and nearly half, 46%, have suffered academic burnout. And I feel like all of us in this room at some point have felt these feelings in college before. And so, my question, opening it back up to you guys regarding cheating and the use of Gen AI, do you guys think it's societal burdens and expectations of that, or is it just like plain laziness? Yeah.
I think people will always cheat, but the thing that ChatGPT does is that it makes it more accessible. Because obviously ChatGPT 3.5 is free. You just need to make an account or sign in with your Google. So like there's that accessibility aspect. People can just log in with any browser, like on their phone or their laptop. So
Yeah.
it's not like you're looking over someone's shoulder.
Exactly.
It's less effort.
Exactly. And even comparatively to like I remember like a couple of years ago when I was in high school at least, like the number one go-to resource that was like paid was Chegg to get like homework help, homework answers. And now for that same stuff, like people just go to ChatGPT. Yeah.
I think people cheat because the learning or like assignments in like school is just a means to the end, which is your degree or your graduation, right? Or diploma if you're in high school.
Yeah.
I knew friends even before GPT was out, and even now when GPT is out, that like pay for Chegg and non-Gen AI, but like answers. Right?
Yeah.
It's technically cheating.
Yeah. Anything else you have, Chin?
I feel like there's always societal burdens, and I think that, sorry, I don't know your name, but I like what you said about people will always cheat, but I think it's kind of like this equation of like how difficult is it for me to cheat versus how much pressure am I feeling at this moment. You know. So I agree that like ChatGPT makes it way easier, so it makes that it changes the balance of that equation.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Moving on. Concerns regarding Gen AI. So based on our research, we saw that New York City and Seattle public schools both have banned ChatGPT on their devices and networks. Educators were really worried that students who turned it in wouldn't like learn critical thinking, problem solving skills, and then there are also concerns that the answers themselves might be in itself wrong. Like imagine a student on school Wi-Fi referencing ChatGPT to help them with some homework problem or with some essay writing, and the answer that they're given is inherently wrong, or like the LLM doesn't generate a correct answer. So these models are like not made to optimize student learning. It is kind of like what we get from these research papers conducted. The responders are kind of trained to give out the answers, spit out the answers as fast as possible, and then it kind of prevents these key learning moments for students or anyone that's kind of like get further into some field or into some topic. There's no real spark of curiosity that the AI itself provides for you to learn or to go further down that path. Whereas like what a teacher would do. And yeah.
Okay, so opening this up to I think a similar thing, just to like get us hungry for the meal. As the appetizer is thinking about how Google has changed how we memorize things, and like when we're learning something or when someone tells us something, or I don't know, if you read something like. I don't even know if it's like a conscious decision or just sometimes you just don't remember it the same way you would remember something else. Okay, so like this is a Google effect. Okay, so say like I use Google very often for getting directions to like the same place, and for some reason it never like stays in my mind, and also maybe like capitals. I don't know. Maybe everyone else remembers capitals. I know me personally, I've been kind of throwing and never memorized them because I feel like I'll always have them on Google, and worst case scenario, I can always look them up there. And so I'm wondering, how does this how is this going to compare to AI? Like, what do you think are going to be things that people choose to not memorize, or is it going to go even to like, are there specific critical thinking things that people are going to not even have to do in the future when it becomes even more common to see AI around? Do we think it's going to be like the same scale as Google in terms of things we can choose to skip to learn because we have this tool like always close to us? Yeah, do you guys have any ideas of specifically like what do you think, like if everyone used AI more, like what do you think you won't have to? Oh yeah. Maybe no one will learn how to plot graphs. Everyone will just use coding.
Yeah, I think it depends though, because like from what I've seen with like my close friends is if people like enough. Some of us want to actually learn it, so we don't use it. But if someone like again, it's mainly like people that have the Chegg subscription as well. They don't want to learn it, so they're not going to. And they're going to use this as like their coding Google or Google for anything. But I have seen it been used for like looking up restaurants in areas, and it works pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
So just like Google, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I think it'll do a lot of things. I think a lot of the things we talked about too were things like it's like just kind of simplifying the process for Google searching stuff. Like it's filtering the information for us, which is really convenient, at least for like synonyms. And I remember your examples, mostly Google definitions. Like you can get that off Google. It's just AI make it easier. Yeah, Jane.
I think people will also probably lose even more patience with long readings than they already have.
Mhm.
Don't have. Yeah, I just, for example, that class in robotics, we have to do discussion readings, like nobody's reading the papers, and they're not even that long. They're like 7 pages or something.
Mhm.
I read them, but it takes me like 30 minutes. It's not that hard. But I feel like, especially with coders, like you ask them to read something. No, so now that there's a tool to summarize it, or people, I think that people will the attention span for reading will go down.
I think that's a really good point. So I think here we're talking specifically about skills, but I think you're right in the sense of it's also like cultural norms. How like having a new technology changes how we view and feel about different things. Like the example you're giving on like the lack of patience people have for long readings. That's probably only going to increase. Let's just be honest with ourselves. Or like even with Google, like where the culture I think, or growing up for example, like I was always told to like just Google it, just Google it, and so Google, in a way, became the highest form of like knowledge authority, for lack of a better word. So I think that's also something to think about is how will these different technologies change our cultural landscape and how will they kind of incorporate into our lives in ways we don't even notice?
I also like that example because I like that example because it is something specifically Google can't do. Like AI is doing a lot of things that Google does. I think dumping long stuff into AI to quickly or analyze is going to be super helpful, I think, in the future. And probably the most like common thing people will depend on it for, maybe. This is you.
That's still my slides.
Yeah, more that is you.
So I guess this is kind of the further question, which is more so on how will ChatGPT or other LLMs affect how we learn, the process of learning itself. So I think I was speaking to a professor, and this is a semi quote, so don't take it don't take it as a literal quote, but it's more or less saying that like even when you don't actively use it, when you have a tool available to you, you know you have that tool available to you. So in some ways, just even knowing that you have it and you can use it changes how you could study. So thinking about how like Google has changed our lives, or okay, like I won't even buy a map anymore. I won't look at maps. I just go to Google. That changes the processes and how I think about like finding directions altogether. So similarly, when we think about LLMs and AI, how like kind of bridging the gaps, I guess, between that and Google. How has it changed? Turn this off. How has it changed your motivation to memorize different content? Like that for Google, and similarly for ChatGPT, how has that changed or affected your learning processes? Do you find that you rely on ChatGPT for certain things more than others? Like, do you see a reliance, like a change in your behavior?
Do you think you remember synonyms less, Annie, because of ChatGPT? Do you think like if you didn't have it, synonyms would stick better in your head?
I'm not sure about that.
No.
Or maybe you're learning more synonyms because ChatGPT can find more synonyms.
Like, for example, like knowing that you have ChatGPT instead of like a thesaurus, for example, like does that make you more like, or I guess like less hesitant to like look up synonyms because you know it's easier than doing it in a thesaurus?
It also makes me have less motivation for like increasing my vocabulary and learning words.
Do you know definitions also stick less when you have like you can quickly like instantly get it? Like if it took like 18 years to find a book and like oh okay I gotta,
Well,
and then when you see it there it'll you have to remember it because otherwise next time you'll have to like take an hour to find a definition.
I would prefer to remember it because it would save me time from me having to use ChatGPT. So
But would you say in actuality that you've gone out of your way to memorize words? Or, for example,
I feel like my memorization level has remained constant. It's just another tool for me to use.
or I guess the follow-up question would be, like, do you find yourself using ChatGPT very frequently to look up definitions? Did you, prior to that, did you find yourself looking up definitions in like dictionaries, for example, or would you just sit there without like knowing what they were about?
Well, probably before ChatGPT, I probably used Google, but now that I just use ChatGPT, I don't use it too often.
Okay, well, I think I wanted the next step into like seeing like, okay, these specific skills like synonyms, definitions, code. Once you pick some skills that are going to be like more easily done by these tools, like the skills become maybe less valuable. And I'm wondering, like, in the future, what kind of skills are going to be the most valuable? And also, could like, how does this affect the general value of learning as we create more tools to do stuff for us? And like, how does it like restructure the importance of learning in general?
Yeah, and other things to kind of think about. I think this one into like cultural landscape is how will it change how we value our degree? Like we go to this college because it's telling us that we'll learn something, and then we get a piece of paper at the end which is valuable to employers. Like how will it change the value of that to ourselves? Will it change the value of your own degree to yourself, for example?
That really reminds
Or
That's a good question.
actually, I don't want to. Okay, so I guess this one's kind of taking a blank. I think that's fair, especially since presumably none of you really use ChatGPT to the extent that it's like embedded. Oh,
I have some. Well, I feel like one of the reasons I'm hesitant to use ChatGPT is because, I mean, obviously this is dependent on the person itself. But when I graduate, I want my degree to mean something, and knowing that, like, if I use ChatGPT a lot, I'll know myself that my degree isn't as valuable as it could have been. So it's kind of like a personal thing where, okay, I want to learn. I want this piece of paper to mean something other than me just using ChatGPT for the past 3 years of learning. So
I think that makes sense. I feel like another way we can kind of frame that is like just literal monetary utility. Like we're paying for these degrees unless you have like huge financial aid. So I think this came up in one of my classes. For every class you miss, you lose like $40. How about for every homework assignment you ChatGPT? How much money are you losing from the knowledge that you aren't capturing there? So I think that's another interest. That's more of like a utilitarian type view, I think, on literal like monetization. But I think that's kind of vaguely similar to yours. And okay, go ahead.
So, kind of thinking through the limit of like, what is the limit of maximum cheating with ChatGPT in college? And whatever. So, my thought is that either if you did that, you would emerge from college and be utterly unprepared for whatever job you were able to get, or you would emerge from that and that job would have been replaced with AI because you cheated through all of the skills using AI that you need for that job, so that that job could just be replaced with AI.
So is your argument then that like if it actually does decrease the value of a degree, then the degree itself was useless to begin with?
Then the degree is in the process of being replaced with that technology, perhaps. Like we don't teach people to get really fast at math, mental math, because we have calculators.
Sure, but you can make the argument that it's not always the knowledge itself, but the process of attaining the knowledge. That is to say, like, the value of learning to learn, of learning, like, familiarity with different topics, because you might not need to directly know how to make a graph, for example, but you should at least know that it has a title. It has, like, this and that. You should have some familiarity with what it should be. Because if you don't have any familiarity with it, then you can't even use tools to make them.
So, I mean, maybe you'll emerge from that and you'll be really good at using AI. So, you know, maybe there will be I don't think that, I very much doubt that all of the functions that get replaced will, you know, people say like, yes, technology will replace jobs, but then it will also create new jobs. I don't think that it's always going to be a one-to-one relationship, and I think that it's not. So, for example, farming, like the number of farmers has precipitously dropped since we recognized it, and that never created that many. Like, that just straight up proved jobs. There was no creation.
I will note, I think this is a slightly different conversation. Yeah. Well, okay, I'll end that tangent by saying universal income. End it there.
I feel like you still need people to use those AI. I think they say AI is going to replace jobs, but a lot of people really believe that people using AI will replace jobs. And I think the people that metagame their whole way through college just crutching on AI, I think it's very possible that those people might just get hired because they the new skill that's valuable is knowing how to make the perfect prompts for AI and getting that to take over and get everything done for you, and that in itself is technically a skill.
Okay.
And that could, if you can get your job done doing that, you got the job done. Ultimately, coders, there's a lot less about, I think, honor after you leave school in terms of getting your work done. It's less about learning, considering how you code. It's people in the workforce are much more like that. They as long as you can get that shit done. I don't care how much you actually know. You just need to you just need to get it done. Okay.
No spoilers.
Yeah, I think other values might be kind of building off what you're saying. It's not just to say someone uses ChatGPT and gets through college. I think employers will look at, okay, I don't care about if you I do care about if you can code. If you're using AI to do it, how would we know, first of all? Or we don't really care. But can you take a project? Can you lead a project? Can you formulate an idea, see it through? I think those skills are still fundamentally important, and AI can't really teach that to you.
But does using AI take that?
No, because it's a tool. It's a tool to get something done. It's not getting. It's not. You can't. I can't spit into it say we're at Microsoft. Tell me a new project that you're working with. Or I could, but it would be pretty shit. Right? Yeah.
Okay, I want to move on to the next bullet point, but before we spoil the entire presentation in one side, but I think we have hearkened on this fact a little bit, which is it. Okay, the second question is more so on how is the fact that other people are using these tools? For example, maybe your classmates are using ChatGPT to do their homework. How does that affect the value of your degree and your knowledge? So, for example, if your classmate's using ChatGPT in a class and you're not, and you end up performing worse, for example, how does that play out for you? How does it affect you when other people use it?
Yeah, I think you're was that a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're at least for me, I feel my thought process is, I might as well use it now because I'm not gaining as much by being stubborn about it and not using it. And I think during COVID, especially in my high school, that was very visible with just cheating in general. Everyone's cheating. I'm gonna be just literally spending time for what? Might as well cheat.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I remember
Yeah.
COVID, regardless of ChatGPT, no, I don't think anyone got any real work done online.
The test taking based on
Yeah, this proposal for me.
I think similarly, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but also kind of how does the fact that maybe your coworker used ChatGPT to get through? They got the degree, you have the degree. Maybe they have better grades than you do. Who is going to be valued more when we can't necessarily check to see who was cheating through college?
The other skills, how do they think through a problem? How do they formulate ideas? How do they break it down? Versus just the coding aspect.
Yeah, what my next follow-up question is say in terms of say in CS classes where in terms of going fully into the technicalities, what if the person kind of knows the pure theory about it, or in terms of what the result should look like and what should go into it, then what if someone along those lines that just pretty good at prompt generation, making code, making some projects, and they have some sort of idea about how OS or how some software in general works, then so say you're saying lead a project at Microsoft, so say they just prompt generate something to ChatGPT and use that to just generate ideas, move on from there, generate the code from there, so on and so forth. Do you not think that could be a possibility?
So you're saying they're you were assuming this person's good at problem generating with AIs.
No, in a sense that if you didn't, this person didn't need to go through the whole rigor of like the technicalities of all the problems, in the sense that they kind of generally understood that like what it should look like, and they just use that in a sense to move on.
I think that's kind of how the world was before AI. The people that can lead will lead, even if they don't understand like the technicalities underneath it. I mean, I don't think like every CEO knows how to code for every
Yeah.
business yet. It's just like that. They don't need to. They just need to have a vision and then execute it.
Trade.
I think that you need. Okay, I'm personally kind of like I'm a stubborn person. Like I would take the L and like let all the other people cheat and just not. But I think you actually need a variation. Like I think you need the person who cheats their way through college with AI, and you also need people that go back to basics and learn every little underlying assumption of abstractions. Because the tools will always break at some point, and then you need the person who understands how the tools work. But you also need the person who's just like really good at using the tools. So, I don't know.
All right. So an exercise that we have for you guys, kind of like create an assignment that allows students, like in your head, like think you're a professor, create an assignment that allows students to freely use ChatGPT and address the concerns outlined before, like loss of skills, lack of learning, and all that stuff that we talked about. What kind of assignment can you create that will actually like challenge a student in terms of critical thinking and problem solving? And what issues do you think you'll encounter when creating this sort of assignment? And what are like key aspects of the assignment that are needed to make sure that the student's proven some sort of learning or like barrier past just that simple AI like Gen AI what it can produce?
Can I get like a subject?
Yeah, take
Choose your favorite subject.
choose any subject.
Okay.
We can break out into groups. You guys can
Yeah, we can just talk for a little bit and then come back.
I think
And
the
Sean.
hardest. I feel like
Yeah,
the
you guys
hardest
can talk.
subjects are. I feel like the hardest would be like art or writing.
Poorly timed biscuit.
You make a writing that allows ChatGPT.
You're doing it like you're not
I was
actually
like,
gonna be.
wait.
I don't know.
Just ChatGPT.
Yeah, but like, how do you?
There's
If,
bound to
if
be
you're a
something
writing
I can't
teacher
disagree.
or English teacher, and you want people to learn some sort of topic, like, how do you let them use ChatGPT and still learn the topic? For specifically, I don't know, like, what's a writing topic?
Like, say you're trying to write some sort of essay, right? And say you can freely use ChatGPT as much as you want, in a sense, to like make the backbone or whatever. Or like, say, make the students write off of that themselves, and then say like, don't use my example. This is my example. My thought was like, say, when the student uses ChatGPT, everything that ChatGPT prompts out, they can just highlight in green. And based off that, they write their own text, finish the body paragraph, highlight that in yellow, and then move on, so on and so forth. Like, you kind of see how that works?
But they could use ChatGPT.
But you can't guarantee that.
Yeah, you
people
can't
actually-
guarantee. Yeah.
And how would you address the like loss of skills? So part of it is
I would like split it up into two parts. So like the first part you can use ChatGPT.
Uh-huh.
That's like the storyboarding, like planning out, generating ideas. And for the second part is when you actually write the essay. That's when it's like,
Well, but you could use ChatGPT to write that essay.
do I have to? Can I just be like, no, only for the first
Well, it's very hard.
You can't prevent the student from doing so.
part? What if it's in the class?
It's very hard in class writing. Or anybody your thoughts, honestly. How would you create an assignment that's like you are allowed to use ChatGPT, however, like you're not going to like or you don't like lose any of the skill per se. You're still learning. But like it doesn't matter if you use ChatGPT or not.
It's getting good though. Yeah. 4 is decent.
What if they ChatGPT their sources?
Yeah, I mean, you can browse online now. Like, for the right. We have one.
It doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily
so,
have to be an essay,
so,
by
like,
the way.
I was in urban farming for like a couple weeks before I dropped it, but it was dope class.
Urban farming.
I did not want to drop it, but I did. But one of the assignments was you have to like plan your farm, and ChatGPT could definitely help it. So that some of the things you have to consider are like where's the shade and where's the sun, how many hours, what kind of fertilizer you're using for what plant, and companion plantings and all this stuff. So ChatGPT, like a lot of that stuff is rote memory, like companion plantings. You just look at a table and look up like what goes with what. It's kind of a complex optimization problem if you're really trying to like optimize it. So ChatGPT can help, but it's also not, it's not going to solve this optimization problem perfectly, and it's not going to be able to take into account all of your local variables because of the inherent like physical nature of farming. So I think that this is kind of cheating on your exercise because it's choosing a subject matter that's just not very amenable to cheating with ChatGPT. It might, so it just might be helpful in general, but it won't solve it for you. But that's what I was thinking. Like, if you're an English teacher and you're just trying to assign something to make people learn English, but then the question is like, is that even a useful skill?
Yeah, I was about to ask that actually. If there are certain topics that we can't chat GPT, I think this was, I don't remember who said this, but it's essentially the idea that if, well, I think you might have said this, Chayton, like if you can chat GPT it, it's going to be replaced anyways. So I guess you can make a similar argument here by saying like, hey, should we even be testing on topics that are just purely chat GPTable? Like, should we have necessarily like fundamental coding classes that are tested because you can just chat GPT it all? Like, what's the value in evaluating it at that point?
I think especially for not higher education,
Mhm.
for like just general education, English class teaches us discourse, critical thinking, which, so my argument for if you can ChatGPT is just like a place, it's primarily like a workplace argument. So yeah, like that skill might not end up earning you money anymore because ChatGPT can do it. But there's value to citizens being able to have discourse and critical thinking that goes well beyond a specific job that you might find to enhance. So in that case, I think that yes, it is still extremely important to not cheat on that assignment. But if you're trying to learn a specific skill for a specific job and you can chat GPT it, then maybe you shouldn't be.
I guess the question I'm asking is more so as in, like, within the like, you're definitely right. There is value in, like, a composition class, for example, or a critical thinking class, for example. But I guess an argument to be made here is, like, those things are valuable, but are the ways that we're currently doing it the only way that we can evaluate student skills? Like, necessarily, does it have to be a piece of writing? Does it have to be an essay? Like, does an English class necessarily have to be an essay? Like, that's definitely an important component, but there's also other components to an English class, like composition, how you kind of splay out your ideas, how you explain them, your evidentiary points. Like, what if it was a presentation instead? Like, you still have to stand up there and present those points and not look like a total idiot, right? So that's a little harder to ChatGPT, I would argue. You can ChatGPT the presentation, but you have to make sure it actually makes sense, and that's one thing ChatGPT is currently really bad at. I don't know. Any other thoughts on this before we move on? Go ahead.
What about an assignment where it's about like prompt generation,
Mhm.
exploring how to make better prompts, and then the skill of that one is using ChatGPT. Yeah, so I guess it's kind of a loophole to this.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a thought.
Thank you for kindly pointing out all the loopholes. I will admit the intention behind this exercise was more so to think within the confines that we're currently in. What classes do we currently have? How can you make those classes unchat-GPTable and not, let's make a new class?
Right. I think
That's a later assignment.
so. Your point about like presentations is good. I think on adding on to that, like what I was saying is like I think that English kind of teaches critical thinking and discourse, so maybe the assignment should be like discourse. Like we used to do Socratic seminars in my English class, and that was really good. So yeah, like whatever it is that it's supposed to be teaching you, that it's still valued. Just assign that.
All right, so this is the universal adoption of Gen AI. Quick gloss over the evolution of technology. Over here on this graph, we can see the adoption of technology. I don't know if you can read this. This is the line for Gen AI. Over here is smartphones, and over here is tablets, and their adoption over the first X amount of years. And so think about previous technologies that existed, right? Like with writing, reading, printing, computers. All at some point were looked down upon for making people lazier, for always going to a calculator, for doing something at the grocery store or something like that. Or and since then they've all become a part of civilization where everyone now doesn't look at it as a crutch. It's kind of part of your everyday life, having these tools. So do you anticipate AI following the same trajectory, as in it's not looked upon, say as a friend now we're talking about students using Gen AI to constantly do some problems, and you think about it as a crutch, but down the line you may think of it as just another tool that you're using similarly to Google. Yeah? Yeah. All right. Yeah, and Vlad pick up from where that is.
Pass the torch.
Yep.
Yeah, this is the robot quote.
It's a quote from Kevin Lynn, actually.
Oh, that wasn't personal. I didn't mean to call Kevin Lynn a robot. I apologize. Okay, so this is I got this from Microsoft. Microsoft is they bought OpenAI, right? So they're very much promoting how awesome AI is going to be and trying to it's going to revolutionize everyone's lives. And so I found a presentation from one of their surveys that I guess they showed around Microsoft. And their leading statistic was 63% of workers say they don't have enough time to sit down and focus and have time to focus on their single person work. And most of their time is spent feeling wasted in meetings or in between that kind of thing, and setting up that kind of thing when they want time to lock in, right? And so I think what they were implying throughout this presentation was kind of with the advent of AI, you're going to be able to take care of a lot of this stuff, because I think it's true, it'll be better at organizing meetings, a lot of this tedious stuff, and you'll be able to spend that time doing the stuff hopefully that you like more. And so this picture is specifically, what are you most hyped for, basically, once AI totally revolutionizes everything. And at the top we got producing high quality work in half the time, and at the bottom we have outsourcing the execution to bring my ideas to life. People love that, not as much as producing high quality work. But I'm wondering, instead of how it'll make you focus on different things while you work, how will you focus on different things while you study? And it's also if we become more efficient, I'm fairly confident in our world, the employers and our professors aren't going to be oh, let them just keep the free time they got from doing it more efficiently. I think instead, once it becomes common to use these tools and shorten your time, it'll just become filled with more assignments. Right. If it takes everyone an average of 20 minutes to do this thing in your lecture, it's not they're just going to have 20-minute lectures. You're just going to have more stuff taught when you're expected to, or it's common to use AI to shorten your task. And so I'm wondering, for me, I'm initially thinking oh, it's going to be lit with AI. I'm not going to have to do tedious work that I despise doing. I get to only do the fun stuff. But that makes me think what is the tedious work? And I think we talking about memorizing definitions, synonyms, code. Without that, will new things become tedious? So I put an anecdote following 3-day weekends. Instead, one complains about Tuesdays. Once the tedious things become taken care of, will new things become tedious? And what will those new things be once AI's common? I don't know if anyone has some ideas. I think I don't want to keep it here for ages. Do you have any ideas for something that might become tedious once AI is normal? Yeah. Prompt generation is going to be miserable.
I personally find just talking to it, when I use ChatGPT, it's it takes me a while to get what I want. Maybe I'm just bad at it because
Mhm.
I don't do too much.
Mhm.
But it does take me a bit. Like it's like minimum like 10 back and forth.
Mhm.
I'm just saying like no, try again.
Yeah. I think also that reminds me, debugging is going to be the new coding, right? It's going to be, or debugging AI responses. I don't know how long it'll take for AI to give you perfect things, but I think trying to figure out what they just said, why it's so wrong, is going to be the new form of like making those initial ideas. Like maybe we'll start spending less time initializing. I don't know. Do you guys see that, or do you guys see other things?
That people that use AI as well, like if they fully like rely on it, say from the start of learning like
Mhm.
AI stuff, they won't even understand what's wrong. So like they'll have to spend even more time and maybe actually like dare I say learn what the code is actually doing, right?
So will the new learning meta, God forbid, be like instead of being taught things, is being taught wrong things and figuring out why it's wrong? Is that going to be like what the future of learning looks like? Is being able to distinct wrong things from right things?
Well, the funny thing about AI is that like we finally got to a place in coding where we're like, okay, we should stop using C because people keep making the same fucking mistakes for the past 40 years,
Mhm.
and it's leading to insane amounts of vulnerable code and people hacking it.
Mhm.
And they were like, we should stop doing that. And now AI is making it really easy to use all of that old shitty code and reproduce it. So they're reproducing all of the same security errors that we finally started fixing.
I think that also.
You will not get an error message about that. It will just be bad code and you'll publish it.
And I think that extends to other. We've done other AI ethics things outside of school, and that's the common issue with like discriminatory tendencies in our society and the things that data is built on. Like, if we've like, I don't know, if like this group of people has been hired significantly less for the past like however many long years, and only recently we started changing those things. If the data like represents those previous years, it's going to try to like recreate those, and we've seen that like at least with like resume scanners, like AI might start like basing what makes a good candidate, things that relate to being a certain group of person as opposed to actual skills. And so I think that's another thing. Like it'll be built on shitty data in terms of like old mistakes, but that also like those mistakes apply to like all parts of humanity, and especially because like AI data is like the internet. There's some garbage on the internet. Gradable work. What do you guys think about gradable work? What will still be gradable if everyone can use AI?
So this is kind of actually going back to the exercise we're having to think about, like what parts of the assignment are still gradable? What can you still evaluate people on while knowing they probably use ChatGPT?
Like, are we assuming everyone's using it?
Yeah, or even like,
Possibility that they might have.
We're assuming.
I think that might be even harder. Like, how do we grade two people purely on what we think they learned, and maybe one person used AI and the other person didn't? Could we have it be like the test still brings out learning either way, even if they don't use AI?
I guess
Like-
AI detection checker.
Sure. Yeah. But even is there? What if they use AI, but we still want to like check their learning even after they use AI? I don't know.
It shouldn't matter either way.
Yeah.
Maybe you could do like if it's for an exam, you could do like a vocal aspect.
Yeah.
Or like where they will have to come to you in person and kind of like explain what they've done.
That's what-
the thinking process was,
That's what I was thinking.
and then you can figure out if you should.
Yeah. Is that gonna be have to like be the only way to like evaluate people in the future? Do you think it's gonna be more common? I know they do that with like languages. Yeah. What do you think?
I like this revolutionary idea. And it's called paper
Mm-hmm.
and a pencil.
Mm-hmm. Is even more now?
People write their answers with their hands.
Yeah.
And no tech.
I think-
Just come in and take an exam.
But that's very poor accessibility.
That's
That's very poor accessibility for certain people. No?
Mm.
I mean, this is how schools ran for like centuries.
Just because we ran out that way doesn't mean it's the right way.
like what most people have been coming and taking an exam in person, and you can't.
Isn't that
Like-
technically discriminatory? Like
It
if you can't come
probably
in person?
like there's lots of
DRSs.
Do we
We could do online.
accommodations you can make for people that really can't. But,
But
Do
if
we
you
just send a prop
Or like
If
online
you-
talk training.
if you default to like online, then
on their iPad?
No, like going camera facing down with like actual physical writing.
I think also in terms of like we could Zoom call people and interview them about the topic. That could be a thing.
I
No.
was gonna say the mockdown browser. Where
What did that work?
Well, you have your phone.
I had a second phone out. Oh yeah, my AP test. I did not alt tab.
just put people in their rooms.
What?
That's facts. We should send people. Okay, let's lock in. Prompt generation, right, guys? Prompt generation, the new meta. Oh yeah, I sent this picture because this was 2015 on the bottom. That's what it looked like. You see all those crazy outfits and cars. Nah, have we done this already? We've done this. We've already.
That's it.
Okay.
We're kind of done. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. So let's
Turn it on.
Welcome to my ASMR video.
What? Stop